feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Thursday evening. It's February 20th, and yes, this is the live show episode. I'm just recording this piece at the beginning here before I head over to Falling Knife. Quickly wanted to pop on here before to let you know the schedule coming up this week. We obviously took last week off for the All-Star break, but are excited to be back, and we're ready to get back in the full swing of things starting on Monday. But wanted to let you know, to make up for no shows this week, we are going to do an episode this weekend. The Wolves play Friday night against the Houston Rockets and then play a back-to-back against the Oklahoma City Thunder on Sunday and Monday. So the plan for this weekend, or for the Saturday episode, is that the beginning of the episode will be Kyle Tighe and I giving some takeaways from the Wolves Rockets game on Friday night. And then for the second half of the episode, I will be joined by Andrew Schlecht, who covers who covers the Thunder for The Athletic. I thought it was good timing to get an episode in with some Thunder perspective while we're mashed in the middle of this little Wolves and Thunder playing each other 3 times in 4 games. Again, that'll be in your feed on Saturday afternoon, and then come Monday, we'll be back to normal. Missed you. Hope you all had a nice break from the Wolves and that you are ready to jump back in. Quick break here, and then we'll get to the live show at Falling Knife. All right. Today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. You guys know Prize Picks. And I wanted to show you that there are some second half of the season options available on here for the Wolves. You can see this up on the screen. They have NBA season second half, and the propositions they have on the Wolves are one on Naz Reid and one on Anthony Edwards. The Naz Reid one is, will he score 30 points in a game the rest of the season? More or less than 0.5 30-point games the rest of the year. Naz has scored 30 in a game one time this season, but he's coming off that 27-point game against the Thunder before the break. You know, it looks like he's, I don't know, I kind of feel good about Naz having 30 in a game before the season ends. Then the other one is, will Anthony Edwards score more or less than 30 points in 10.5 games the final 26? So of the final 26, if you think he's going to have 30 plus in 11, you choose the more side. If you think he's going to have 30 plus in 10 or fewer, you take the lesser side of that. I looked it up. Ant has played in 54 games this season, scored more than 30 in 18 of those games. So that trend would say that 10.5 is high, you know, and that maybe you should go less than on that. But, you know, if Ant goes or continues to be on this heater that he's on, has, you know, averages 30 a game the rest of the way, I think it's pretty likely that he'll get more than that 10.5. So you can pick one of those, both of those. There's obviously all the other teams have second half ones here too. You can find 30 plus games, 10-point plus games, 40 plus point games, a bunch of stuff on Prize Picks. Rather than doing a specific game, I thought I'd tell you about that because that's kind of a fun season long type thing to be able to do, to track not just every night, but yeah, for the rest of the way. I know I did some of those with the NFL. I thought they were really fun. So head over to prizepicks.com or the Prize Picks app if you want to play the second half NBA season options there, or just normal. You know, they got the NBA's back, got games going on all week. If you don't have an account, sign up using the promo code DANE, and your account will be credited with $50 when you make your first $5 lineup. All right, let's go to Falling Knife. All right. This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast coming to you Thursday evening. We're live here at Falling Knife Brewing Company. Very cool to see many of you here. We're going to do a podcast for you. This is Britt Robson. It's here for Britt. Britt, you can say hello. 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 So what we always kind of do for these, is your first time coming to one of these live shows, the two of us will do a podcast for a while, but we also what we'd like to do at these is take questions from those of you who are here in person. I think sometimes we can just go down our little rabbit holes. Sometimes it's good for you to point us in the right direction. So eventually we'll do that. We got a third mic over here. But Britt, I just thought we would start by kind of talking about this last chapter of the Wolves season. That's kind of coming here. There's 26 games left to go
in this season. And when I was looking at it this morning, I'm looking at the season in two sort of chunks. It's that first chunk of the year where clearly this group is acclimating. That's kind of 2024, right? October, November, December. I have the numbers here. They were 17 and 15 in that time. And then seemed to kind of turn a weird corner in January. It hasn't been consistent. But if they had been the team all season that they were in January and February thus far, pretty good. That's a pretty good level. So I'm just wondering if you think that can sustain and what that would mean for the rest of the season.
Well, I think the problem with the season is there has been no sustain. So if you're asking me if I think they'll sustain, my default answer is no. At the same time, I wouldn't be shocked if they did because they have a lot of talent. I think Chris Finch is a good coach. I think he is firmly convinced he's in win now mode, and he really has believed. You could see in his pregame and postgame press conferences that he thinks they've turned a corner and he thinks they're better. And in a lot of ways, their turnovers are down, their offensive rebounds are up. Some of the things that continue to plague them are less onerous, but they still lose to a Milwaukee Bucks team without their two best players. They still will lose to a Washington Wizards team that had two 16-game losing streaks on a Saturday in February, and then turn around and beat a Portland Trailblazers team that had won 10 of 11. And after losing to the Bucks, turn around and beat what I regard as one of the best teams in the NBA over the last 3 or 4 seasons in the Thunder. So to say you expect or you plan on anything happening with this team, I don't think that's the way to go. This team needs to be 25-1 to match last year's record.
Possible.
So you're saying this?
So, okay. This morning when I was looking at it, if you look at these different segments of the season, the record never stood out. Again,
right.
October and December, they're acclimating. They're 17 and 15. January they're 10 and 6, and then in February they're 4 and 4.
Right.
But I think if you look, or what I know, if you just look at the numbers of where this team has ranked in terms of where the offense is,
right,
and where the defense is, and where their net between their offense and the defense is, it suggests in every segment of the season that they would have a better record than they have there. Which to me goes, all right, why would that be clutch time? They've been bad in the clutch all year. They've been inconsistent in their motor, right? With the Atlanta games, Milwaukee, whatever, where it's pretty obvious that they're not every engine is firing. But at the same time, you look at some of these stuff, and you look at January, which is really where this turned. 6th in offense in January, 7th in defense. In February, 13th in offense, 9th in defense. You put January and February together, 6th in offense, 6th in defense, over a 24-game span. That's like fourth best net rating in that time.
Right. The net rating is really interesting because it exemplifies how bad they've been in the clutch.
Yeah.
But I also think this is both a negative and a positive that they have never had a set lineup settle in for enough time to really be reliable. I think when you had Randle incorporated, that was a 6 to 7 week span. I think that once you started to incorporate that, and you took Conley out of the lineup, which as a reserve enabled him to be more of a playmaker with Randle on the floor, and then you made Randle more of a playmaker when Conley came back because DiVincenzo got hurt, and then you had that slew of injuries that brought in Clark and Dillingham more often and Shannon. And you've seen positives and negatives every step of the way. You've seen that Julius Randle, despite the fact that he obviously is not a good fit for the overall talent on this team, has really worked hard to fit in many ways and has fit in many ways. For a guy who's got a player option, his numbers are, people are going to look at it and say he's had a down year. It's because he's sacrificing opportunities to make the team better, which is what you're supposed to do. DiVincenzo started poorly, finally got into a groove, hurt his toe. We saw about 2 weeks of DiVincenzo being a lot better point guard. He came in knowing he was the backup point guard and not playing well the same way Na thought he was the backup point guard and did not play well in the preseason. That onus of being the point guard, I think, affected both of them until they could both settle down. So the point I'm making is, what is the lineup? I mean, I will tell you quite frankly, we know that throughout the season, some of the most consistent players, Nas and Na come off the bench. They have been the most consistent players on the team this year. Even Nas, who had a bad start, but he had a bad start because he was playing center when he thought he was going to be a small forward. And they didn't put Randle on the big when Randle subsequently proved he was more than capable of guarding the big, which would free Nas up. So Nas Reid has been the second best player on the Timberwolves this year. I don't think that's debatable. And you have a situation where he'll probably come off the bench again when Randle comes in. The Timberwolves have been neither nor all year. They have not been a team, as last year's team was, that hit the ground knowing who they were, emboldened by the fact that who they were turned out to be pretty damn good. And they never lost more than 2 games in the regular season throughout the season. And this year they started with 3 or 4 3-game losing streaks in the first 2 or 3 months of the season. That robs confidence. It was unfamiliarity. It was a lot like the season 2 years ago when they were trying to incorporate Gobert. And Gobert's numbers, oddly enough, or maybe not so oddly, coincidentally, are very similar to the things that he rebounding and that type of stuff, blocks. He is back to being less reliable than he was last year. So again, where do you just lay down your marker? You lay down your marker on Anthony Edwards again taking a step. I understand he's having trouble finishing at the rim. He's got the highest effective field goal percentage and the highest true shooting percentage of his career. That is a marker. Nas, I believe, has proven. I mean, I've got net ratings, two lineup player net ratings. His worst one is +3. I mean, he can play with anyone. See,
So, I think
that was a concise answer.
With Randle, I think what I was going to get to eventually was the Nas Reid versus Julius Randle, and who should start thing, and that's why I started pulling up these numbers in the first place, being like, all right, how is kind of the graph moved over the course of the year? When have they been up as a team? When have they been down as a team? And individually, how have they gone through? And what was standing out to me was that in January, kind of everything worked, and at different times. DiVincenzo goes into the starting lineup, and I know it didn't last long, but it was kind of like on the wings of him coming up in a bench role, and then they made the change, and that worked. Nas Reid, obviously, his opportunity really grew in this time. He's been playing his best basketball in 2025. So was Julius Randle. Right. And I think that part, I don't really know what to do with that exactly, but I think you can have this opinion, and I probably share it, about needing to start Nas Reid instead of Julius Randle. But if you only live in that part of it, where you're like, it just has to be Nas Reid, just need to do that, and ignore the Julius part, I think you're actually ignoring the upside of what this team is, because what we also kind of found in December and January is Randle and Reid can play together. And they've both been able to be really effective with Gobert. Like, there is a way that Nas Reid and Julius Randle both playing 30-plus minutes a night, if you can find a way to do that, is actually the most advantageous way that the Wolves can put this whole thing together. And I think you run a danger of doing either or. And then you end up with kind of neither nor.
Yeah, that's a good point. But I think when that happens, you have to factor in diminishment to Gobert. And that, again, I mean, Chris Finch has a lot of political problems here. I mean, Julius Randle It's the reality of it. He's got a player option next year for $31 million. He can exercise it and stay with the team, or he can play well enough to be worth more than that. That's an incentive for both him and the Wolves to have him play better because they can't afford to have him on the team, quite frankly. But I also think, I mean, I keep saying this. I know I sound like a Wolves apologist, but I don't think there are any villains here. I don't think Julius Randle is a villain. I don't think Chris Finch is a villain for trying to solidify his relationship with Julius Randle and get the most out of him. I don't think Tim Connelly is a villain for trading Cat as bad as it's been for this season. I think in the long run it'll prove to be the right move. I think it was a brave trade, and I think this team is not as good. But I don't think Tim Connelly is a villain for that. What has happened, though, is that there has been less cohesion, less reliability, and consequently, for whatever reason, the most disappointing thing for me about the Timberwolves this year is that they don't have as much character, they don't have as much integrity as they had last year. They don't win games that you know they should win. They don't set the nail. They don't, break.
You kind of need to know who you are to have the integrity of who you are.
Yes. And so, by that metric, you give up on Julius Randle because you know who you are. Nas is beside Rudy in the starting lineup. And then you put Randle in with the bench and let him work it out there.
I just wouldn't call that giving up.
Well, you know what I mean. It's
No, but that's my point. It's a distinction to be made of I think it's pretty important for the Wolves to reach their ceiling this season to make an effective shift towards Reid in lieu of Randle without letting go of Randle. He is important to the floor of this. He might not be the second best player on the team, but he's certainly in the top 5 or 6.
We don't know, and probably won't know, how Julius Randle feels about not starting. We do know that Nas Reid and Rudy Gobert have worked really, really well for 2 years in a row now.
Yep.
They have a +7 in their 800, 700 minutes together. That's a pretty good sample size. And we know that Rudy and Randle is not as good as that. We also know just by common sense that if you have Randle, Rudy, and Ant on the floor, you take away some of Mike Conley's playmaking, you take away some of the spacing for Ant to drive, and you don't have that pick and roll option with Conley and Rudy as easily as you do otherwise. And you also are forcing Randle to play a type of game that is antithetical to the way he likes to play. Which is why all season long I've said Nas should start, because I do think, Na and Randle actually have a phenomenal net rating together. Na has a good net rating with just about everybody, but I think that those guys, Na moves well without the ball, and Randle finds people when he has the ball. And so that's a really good combination. If Na's coming off the bench and Randle is there to give it to him, and then we bring in, maybe some of the kids spotting minutes and maybe have Ant out there at the same time without, either Rudy or Nas, depending on who you want to sit on the bench. I think that has more possibility than the status quo that started the season and the status quo that I frankly assume will happen if and when Randle comes back.
So this is mostly just devil's advocate, but the start of the season, the things you're listing off about what didn't work at the start of the season.
Right.
And I don't necessarily have faith that they're going to work now. But part of the reason that Randle specifically, or that group, was not working could have been about acclimation and continuity that they did not know in October, November, or December, that they might know better in February and March and April. And that's, I say that because I think that's what he's going to do. I think that's what Mitch is going to believe in. Right. He's going to believe in this idea, we've been coming together, we've been coming around, and I believe in that same vision I had in October and November. I'm just going to apply it now and expect different results, not because I'm insane, but because actually a lot of different things have changed over the course of time so as to make it work. And again, I don't know if it needs to be Nas that starts or Julius, but how that needs to work. But I just keep saying it. I think it can work if Nas doesn't. I think there's ways still to
I think there are ways it can work, but I also think it involves a Dante DiVincenzo at the point, and he's out too. I think that Dillingham at the point makes it even easier for Randle to seize more playmaking. And I think that Conley at the point is marginalized. He said as much 4 or 5 different ways obliquely, I know I'm running from corner to corner. And not that Mike Conley did himself any favors with his November, but if we're talking about what you settle into, the Timberwolves had a lineup last year of Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Nas Reid, Jaden McDaniels, and Rudy Gobert that played a lot and played well. And they have that again this season, and they haven't used it as much. But the components are still there for them to play a lot and play well. That does not necessarily, as you pointed out, marginalize Julius Randle, but it does remove the starter's designation from him. And one of the things I've learned, I've covered this game for a long, long time, I've never understood it, but some players really resent not starting. They really think that that is an insult. And so I don't know if Randle is one of those people or not.
I mean, I would imagine he is. I think that's prolific. A lot of different places, all-star team, numerous times, whatever. I just wanted to start my opinion on the Nas Julius thing of like the biggest thing is making it work, and maybe the route to making it work is leaning on the Nas Reid, who does have a lot of experience coming off the bench, playing different roles, and he's probably going to be better and way more natural fit net as he's done it. Julius Randle has. But the other thing is like Nas' numbers are nuts, and we've been watching it. But his play is nuts. I'm trying to use the numbers to encapsulate what we've been watching every night for the past, 2, 6, 7 weeks, right? January and February, Nas Reid played 30 minutes per game, 17.5 points per game, 6.5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, only 1 turnover per game. He's shooting 55% from 2, and in those 23 games over January and February, he's shooting 48% from 3 on over 6 3-point attempts per game. That is nuts.
And defending really well beside Rudy Gobert.
Well, and then what do you get through those numbers? It's worse. It's all the same things. He spent a couple more minutes per game, scored a couple fewer points per game. Randle played 16 games January and February, 16.5 points per game, 7.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, but turning it over more while he does it, shooting 56% from 2 and 23% from 3. And I think like that's the biggest thing where the shift in Finch's mind or just the way he's viewed by the organization needs to change. It's like Nas Reid needs to start being viewed as one of the best 3-point shooters in the NBA, I think. And once you do that and you give him that credit, then you stop going, well, but Julius is really good at playmaking. Julius is good at playmaking. He's probably better at playmaking than Nas is. But Nas is a million miles more of a shooter than Julius is. And I just think that those things should be counterbalanced out, and that what Nas is as a player right now needs to be considered by Chris Finch, not what Nas Reid was 3 years ago. When I think that's the backwards part of it from the Finch perspective, is he's thinking about who these guys were a couple of years ago. Julius, making All-NBA in New York, or even a couple of years before that in New Orleans when he was at Finch. And Nas was not this good. I just think it has shifted here that Nas did. I just think Nas is a better player.
Well, I think he's obviously trying to thread a needle, a very fine line between keeping Randle happy and productive and getting the most out of his top 8 to 10 people. There are times that I've been really frustrated with Finch because he hasn't used Nas in the way I think he should be used. But I have also seen during this January, February time you're talking about, where Finch's logic has come, you've seen what happens. And you've seen that this team does have an offensive component to it that they didn't have last year. And the defense is not that far behind from what it was last year. I keep coming back to the fact, who makes things easy? Julius Randle, as good as he can be, and with his skill set, is not a bad skill set. In the modern NBA, and given who he is as a player and his habits and his contract situation, all of that makes his presence less easy for the people on the court with him. Why not have the people on the court with him be players coming off the bench, by definition, who need somebody who can help be an organizer, can go get a bucket on his own, can dish to you for a three-point play if you're moving without the ball, and not for nothing is the best backup center on the team. So I say, I've said it pretty much now. You have to start Nas Reid, and you have to bring Julius Randle off the bench.
So let me ask you this though. You said a little bit earlier, I think Finch is a smart coach. I think Finch knows what he's doing. And you're outly disagreeing with what he is doing.
Absolutely.
And I'm just like, what do you think Finch is going to do then for these last 25?
I think he's going to do what I don't want him to do.
Does that not line up? Like, why? So is it
Well, I think that obviously you've got a guy who came over in a trade. He is on this player option, and you have a circumstance where he is meeting you halfway. Do I think it's the best solution? No. Do I think that they both have made the best of that solution and it is a better solution than I thought it would be? Yes. Do I think that Finch is overrating whatever kind of breakthrough high bar he's looking towards that can make this work? I think that is maybe not a fatal flaw, obviously, but it's not good. Doesn't speak well for his coaching decisions in 24-25, in my opinion. So I get where he's coming from. I mean, Julius Randle sat at that press conference and said, Chris Finch gets me, he made me a better player than I've ever been in New Orleans. I have total faith in the guy. And everybody who could see what this team was would say, well, he's a bad fit. Well, he's had a pretty good year and he's had a very unselfish year. I keep coming back to the fact, what are you saving it for, though? What is the end game with Julius Randle? I mean, I wrote this a month ago. It's going to end badly. It's not going to end well. The Julius Randle Minnesota Timberwolves relationship cannot end well because they don't have room for it. You cannot sign Julius Randle and Nas Reid for what they both think they're worth. And I think Julius Randle is a little bit delusional in what he thinks he's worth. And I think Nas Reid knows damn well what he's worth and has bided his time over and over and over again. He could have been a starter for any team last year. He was the sixth man of the year. This year again, he's playing extremely well. Not for nothing. I mean, his towel is over there on the wall. There is a that night where they were going for triple digits on eBay within an hour of it. I mean, A-Rod and Lori are not going to say, well, let's keep the guy who is really kind of out of step with 2025 basketball and get rid of this Nas guy who's a folk hero. Steve Terry practically, wants to put him in his logo. I mean,
Good burn there.
Why not?
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think it's this weird confliction of like, what are you going for this now, right? Are you trying to maximize this season? And every indication we've gotten from Finch and then it's like, yeah, they're trying to see how far they can go this season, which is the reason the young guys haven't played as much. It's squeezing every drop out of this. And I think Finch is right that to squeeze every drop out of this season, that's the goal. You need to have like this cocktail of Nas and Julius both happening and both being effective, which was working in January. I think that's why Finch will go back to the way it was in January, and I will frankly be impressed because we'll show some real oomph, if he's able to find that same January thing where Reid and Randle are both playing well, but Nas starts because
that would be the best of all circumstances because let's remember, and the Wolves kind of blew this in the first 3 weeks of the season. But the most pleasant surprise for Julius Randle is he can guard opposing bigs. He guarded Zion Williamson and Anthony Davis better than anybody on the team, including Gobert. That is a skill that if you're going to be paying somebody what he's making, and you want to use him in ways, he is the backup center, but he overlaps when those guys are on the floor. So that he's playing against quality people. Again, it has to come back to so many things that you and I and everybody else doesn't know about. An NBA team has millions of mini dramas behind the scenes, and there are entourages, there are agents, there are weird family members. There's all kinds of subterranean bullshit that goes on in every NBA team. It does. And so, a really good friend of mine, Bob Hummel, his best friend was Sam Mitchell. And he wouldn't tell me about it during the time, but he told me about it after Sam was the coach of the Toronto Raptors for a while. All the chapter and verse that went on behind the scenes there, and it's ridiculous. And so, again,
that is kind of like Finch's thing, right? Is like his style is the Zen. I'm going to keep the peace rather than I'm going to choose the options that don't even let us kind of toil in the.
I think at the end of the day, you have to unlock Rudy Gobert, and I think Rudy Gobert, it's very obvious, is more comfortable playing with Nas Reid than he is playing with Julius Randle.
Unlock Rudy Gobert. We do have another mic here. If you would, whoever wants to come up and ask a question. I don't know if that dude was standing there before, but anybody, if you want to just line up right there, you can ask a question. I'll turn that mic on. What are you thinking just from like a win-loss standpoint? The rest of this way, 26 games. They got this. They got the Rockets, Lakers, Thunder here immediately. But like, where are you at as far as like an expectation for their record, where it finishes, or what they do over the last?
I'll be really honest with you. I'm interested in the quality of play rather than the wins and losses, and I do think that there's a decent chance they wind up playing the Houston Rockets or the Denver Nuggets in the first round of a playoff series. And I consider that to be a puncher's chance. I consider that to be, that's not a bad way, the way all this season has happened.
Those guys agree.
I play in the crowd. But so I think that if you're in the mix, if you're anywhere from 7 to 5, you might get a matchup that is going to be something. I think this team may find itself at that point in time and at least give people a game. I don't know, it's very hard to suddenly turn it on for the playoffs. But I also think when you've been a conference finalist the year before, and you've had a slightly disappointing season that you can explain away by unfamiliarity and various noise in the circuits, and say, okay, it's the playoffs, brand new slate. We beat these guys last year, or we beat these guys 2 out of 3 this year, or whatever. There's reason to think they can be a force in April and early May.
And my point of bringing up those numbers were the underlying numbers of the season and the reason. The direction they're pointing suggests that could happen, and actually suggests it will happen if they stop messing around with the immature BS and the clutch stuff and all of that. Because, again, the record is not indicative of what the numbers suggest. And so they need to rectify whatever the hell that is that's going on. But if they can, I think we've seen it, and we've seen games, right? Like we've seen the Thunder game of what that looks like. We've seen this group at full strength, the Knicks game, And what they can be against good teams. It's just, as you said at the beginning, like the identity of this team is inconsistency. My point just is through the inconsistency, like the trend line is in a pretty good place. I'm gonna grab a question from we got some people here with questions here. We'll keep rolling. What do you got?
Well, this is not as related to your current discussion, so I'm sorry. It's
Good, but we did a half hour on that.
Yeah,
We're gonna wrap that up.
So I need you to settle the debate. So I've been in a fervorous debate with somebody on this one. If you were to swap Anthony Edwards with Darius Garland, which team gets better? Do both teams get better? Do both teams get worse? Vice versa, something like that. And also, specifically on the offensive side, who's getting better, who's getting worse? I'll listen to your thoughts.
We do random questions. I got a thing that could catch me off guard. Not that Darius Garland on my bingo card. Almost a Timberwolf, but Jared Culver. You want to take that one?
Exactly right. I think I'm famously a person that doesn't believe in, the trade machine and hypotheticals, and we could do this if we did that, so on and so forth. I think that we deal with what we have in front of us.
I think it's the idea of like conceptually.
I will dignify the question with an answer, which is that Anthony Edwards on the Cleveland Cavaliers would take them a while to change the dynamic. But having Jared Allen and Evan Mobley and Donovan Mitchell on that team, the Cavs would have to throw in at least 2 or 3 first rounders and Okoro and
I don't think that's the idea. I don't think it's like an actual like. It's obvious the Wolves wouldn't do that. Yeah, I don't know. It's the idea of what if the Wolves had a really good point guard? How much of a difference would that make for this team? I mean, it's kind of irrelevant at the cost of Ant, but.
Well, I mean, if that's the question, then the question is, you got a decent point guard now. Where's your ace scorer coming from?
Yeah, I think we've solved the question of just any Ant for Darius Garland trade is probably not a good idea. We can do another question here.
D-minus.
I have questions about Jaden McDaniels and kind of his perception and value around the league. Looking back over the last 18 months or so, he's gotten defensive all defense. He's got a big pay raise, and started this year he struggled quite a bit, and he's had a big turnaround. But a lot of that correlates with the fact that is kind of acknowledged by himself. We told you staff that he's not a 3-point shooter. So I guess my question is, we live in the Wolves bubble. From more of a broad perspective, what's kind of the perception and view of Jaden and the NBA as a whole?
That's a good question. I think he's a somewhat like relatively unknown sort of thing, and I think initially, right, Britt, you'd say like it was just like, whoa, here's this 6'11" kid who can guard the perimeter. Like that in of itself, you knew that like 2-3 years ago, and I think that was pretty well accepted 2 years ago, right?
Right.
Pretty well accepted. Like he's awesome at that. He's going to be really good at that, Britt. And that's not for nothing. That in and of itself is an important skill that keeps you in the league for a long time. I think, to Finch's credit and to his teammates' credit, they've always been like, there's more here. There's other things. There's other things offensive that we've honestly seen in the last couple of weeks, right? I do think like around the league though, which maybe your question is from like kind of like a trade standpoint or like how's that contract viewed? I don't think that part of Jaden's game is like well understood or even maybe like believed in at this point. The reality of the situation is like a lot of teams don't watch other teams, and they're looking at just trend lines of this and that. And honestly, for a lot of teams, they would look at, all right, McDaniels is shooting 28% from the corner this year. That in and of itself drops him out of the top 100 players because he's a 3-and-D guy, This is the way they kind of view it because they don't watch. And I think that's the cool thing with McDaniels is you do kind of need to be watching all the time to know like what he can be and to also know what we all kind of know, like what he is, right? Like he's not gonna be that guy where we're like, yes, here's a semi-contested three for McDaniels, let it rip. Like, I don't think that's ever going to be, that shouldn't be, the perception. Hot, sure. If it's open, take them. But I think he's one of those weird players where there's these clear flaws, but we don't know how costly they actually are. And the external perception is that they definitely are costly. That would be my read.
Would it surprise people to know that Jaden McDaniels is top 10 in the NBA in steals and top 30 in blocks? Because he is. He's 8th in steals and he's 28th in blocks. So he's pretty good. And I would also say that since they've taken him off the ball more, which I think is a counterintuitively brilliant move, and only used him at different times or only used him in certain matchups. He has thrived as a great box-out rebounder. He boxes out as well as anybody on the team. His mid-range game, both in terms of passing and shooting, is remarkably evolving.
Yeah.
Jay McDaniels cannot catch and shoot three-pointers, and they tried to make him that for a long time, and it didn't work. And suddenly, Jay McDaniels realized he could do a half-assed up fake, put the ball on the deck, and make a lot more damage happen than the way they were using him. And Finch admits that Jaden did a lot of this himself. And he wanted, and when I did my interview with him preseason, before all the trade, kind of scrambled everything, he basically said he wanted Jade to be more of a playmaker and not some guy who stands in the corner. And this is another way that Julius Randle kind of screwed the mix, because he would draw three people in and kick it out. And
Explain some of Jaden's rough start to the season as it did Mike.
Totally. And so what we've seen from Jake McDaniels in the last 5 weeks, I'd say, is he a $28 million player? Absolutely. Is he getting paid one?
2.
Well, there you go.
You can tell in my eyes that I didn't agree with that. Oh.
So he can be, I am on record saying I think he's slightly overrated as a tremendous on-ball wing defender. I think he peaked at that 2 years ago. Last year, it's kind of like somebody wins an Oscar because they gave a fantastic performance the year before. But I do think he is a very solid on-ball defender. I think he is also a burgeoning plus rebounder. He's great as a gap help guy. He is playing big all of a sudden. He's playing bigger than he's ever played in his life. He is a legit 6'10". He does have a big wingspan. He's not a small forward. If he's a small forward, he's a huge small forward and can play like a huge small forward, which is a pretty cool attribute to have in the modern NBA. When he and Nas are on the floor as 5'4", it is a really intriguing option. Doesn't work all the time, but it is a hell of a wrinkle.
That's two-man pairings since January 1st is Reid and McDaniels.
So, again, and they just happen to be in the same timeline. By the way, Jaden McDaniels is, 24. Nas Reid is 25. And, and McDaniels is on a decent contract for quite some time, even less. So, essentially, my answer is the ways that he has made his reputation has now become slightly overrated. But the broad contours of his game, I think, are vastly underrated. And I think if the Wolves explore it a little bit, they're going to find out that a guy who's just entering his mid-20s is a bargain.
So cool. I think they have been exploring it over the last few weeks out of necessity due to the injuries, which has been cool for us. We've all kind of been like, well, what do you mean Jaden can do more? Well, the last game against Thunder is the primary example he did.
And so, just really fast, I do think that in the locker room, he's one of the most popular players. Everybody swears by him. They just love him. And can't say enough good things about him. Nas calls him his best friend.
Jaden's never talked, period.
And I will say, if there is a red flag with Jaden, is that he's got a crazy gene.
I love
He's
that.
got somebody who, he will drop the ball through the rim in a 28-point win in the last second.
I think that's why he's good, though. Like, I literally think, like, I asked Mitch about that after the last game. I was like, is it, like, because Jaden is so competitive, is that why it's literally kind of went in a different direction? But, like, I've been thinking that recently, mostly just because it's, like, obvious. If you watch Jaden play, like, he's an asshole. Like, and I think that's, like, his
a
special
case can be made for that being a good thing, but it also can be a bad.
At least it's positive. Okay, so another question. Okay.
So I think over the last couple of weeks, we've seen like really good signs from Terrence Shannon and from Jalen Clark. But knowing how their playing time has kind of been opened up by injuries to Mike and to Dante and to Julius, how would you like to see those two fit into the rotation when we have a fully healthy roster?
Yeah. After the Thunder game, Finch said, like, well, did leave it open that another guy is going to play. But the way he put it, it was like, it might be one guy one night and another guy another night. And to me, I think they learned their lesson with the like half role for the ninth man. It's like, all right, 5 minutes here, but probably not this. Like, just if you're gonna play him, you gotta actually give a guy a real opportunity. But obviously, they can't play both Jalen Clark and Terrence Shannon Jr. both 14 minutes a night, right? Unless you want to cut down Dante DiVincenzo to 14 or not, or whatever. Like it doesn't work. So I think that's what's going to happen. Do you have like I think you're more Clark than Shannon right now, if you had to choose, right? I think I'm on the Shannon side.
Well, it all depends on what you need.
Yeah.
These guys are by definition role players. So then you ask, who are they playing with? One of the reasons I'm a Clark guy is because he's more versatile than Shannon. He can play a quote power forward. He's a very small power forward, but he bodies up hard against people bigger than him. And he can go down to two guard. That's kind of cool if he's your ninth man. Shannon, on the other hand, is good in the open court. He's good in transition. The Wolves need transition players. And if you're playing against a team that has a lot of turnovers, and you're playing against a team that is a little bit lazy defensively, I would give Terrence Shannon some run by all means. I think they are role players, and so therefore you have to see what the role is, tell them this will be a night when you may get some burn because your role fits with who they're playing. So as a overachieving guy, I have a soft spot for Jalen Clark. He had me ever since he literally said he'd run through a wall for somebody,
I haven't seen you.
and not only that, but I mean, I really do. He meant it more than anybody I've ever heard him say those words.
sure.
Mean it. Like if somebody said, "You're bullshit me, go run through that wall," I really think he might.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the quality that I don't mind in my ninth man. So, but in answer to your question, it's probably a moot point because Dante DiVincenzo is really good, and Julius Randle is really good, and Naz Reid is really good, and the original 5 starters, or there's somebody else out there I'm forgetting, but those 8 players, the starting 8, as they say, it's hard to get those guys out of their rhythm. It's hard not to give all of those guys 18 to 20 minutes.
I think it's nice that like Randall is going to come back at a different time than DiVincenzo is going to come back at a different time than Conley is going to come back. There's going to be some opportunity, I think, for some opportunity, that you can then take away because it should. Like Rob Dillingham is up for that 9th man role too, if it is the 8 starters. So I think the good thing with Shannon and Clark is like they show that they can just kind of like pop on when you need them and treat them as such in that way. It doesn't seem to be like a great alternative there. And I would just like remind you that Shannon's on his rookie contract in like year 1 of it. Like this, because he's on a good above average team, like it might just be a longer route there. Same thing with Jalen Clark. Like if they are able to get him onto like one of those contracts like Minot's on or Naz Reid is on, like it feels so much right now like God plan. They've been a great spark here. I've done this enough, like remembering back and been like, yeah, I did that. Whatever player X had their opportunity, and it's okay to just be like, that player had their opportunity. They played for 8 games. Let's remember what they did. Capsule that. It's still not. Odds are it's not better than the starters. You know,
Jalen Noel can get a job.
sure. Jalen Noel's a perfect example of that. Where you think about it.
Right. So, and I should also mention that Dillingham, and this matters, the treasurer was expended for Dillingham, a 2031 first-round pick, which is, sounds silly now. He's a proverbial 12-year-old, but he also will be a coveted person, and Dillingham has to
That's an asset.
prove himself.
Yeah.
So I do think what I would do, people who love Shannon or Clark or Dillingham or whatever, look at this roster in 2028. It looks pretty interesting. The kind of people that Tim Connolly wants to stockpile here. It is a fun team. I don't know how well they can defend, but I can tell you they will be quick. And it will be a gas to watch if they develop everybody on a timeline and you've got Nas and Ant and Jaden and so on and so forth, and you add somebody else, as a mid-level guy or whatever.
Once Rudy's gone, you don't replace him with another Rudy.
Exactly.
That's we can do another question here. Yeah.
Thanks, Phyllis. You mentioned earlier that the clutch time stuff doesn't really pass the eye test this year. I saw in Sports Illustrated they're 25th in the league in terms of clutch time winning percentage. So I'm curious to hear what you attribute the struggles in clutch time to, and if you're going to play armchair quarterback, what are some possible solutions moving forward to the clutch time stuff?
I mean, the answer to the clutch time stuff, unfortunately, is Ant. He's just straight up not very good at that. Right? And that isn't even just like his shooting percentage at the end of games. It's his understanding of those spots and what we need to do. And a lot of times defenses will use something different in the last 4 minutes of the game, even if you've been seeing something else for the previous 40. And I mean, what was the game where they lost recently in clutch and Ant missed the
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee, yeah. So after the Milwaukee game, before the Thunder game, I watched all the clutch possessions, and Ant is going rogue. He's going, and we were there, and we talked to him. I mean, he's doing something. He's 23, and he's incredible. And still scoring a ton as he goes rogue in those times. But the reality of the situation, with all of the things that are tied to maturity and execution and stuff like that, we can point to all of these other things like Finch and the other player, Mike Conley, he didn't do this, or Julius had a turnover. At the end of the day, man, all this stuff, the difference between what the numbers are saying they should be, what the win-loss record is it's just Ant not there yet. And the question is, when does that gear switch? He's still already awesome. They're going to be really good with Ant just because he plays a lot. But when will Ant become playing chess out there? When he starts playing chess, it's over. It's over. Like, the clutch time stuff is done. Maturity stuff is done. The falling asleep stuff on defense is done. Like, they get better and better and better, like, by a lot. Once those things click in Ant's head, and they don't click yet. They just don't click yet. There's been numerous games at the end where they call the play and he's gone rogue because the defense blew it up. Because that's what defenses do at those times. The clutch time stuff and the execution stuff and the mentality against Atlanta and Milwaukee and those sort of things, it's Ant. It's the number one common denominator there. Doesn't mean he's not the best player. Doesn't mean he's not the future. Doesn't mean all those things. That's just what it is right now when he's, in my opinion, when he's 20.
I'm going to say something without knowing the actual fact. This is a
Good start.
a theory.
Yeah.
Because what he said, I believe, is somewhat accurate, but that's Chris Finch's job, isn't it?
Sure.
I mean, you don't go rogue on the coach. You go rogue.
That's why I would have called a timeout with 11 seconds left against Milwaukee right there. So he couldn't just.
I think Chris Finch has made a bargain with himself and with Ant, which is he is a burgeoning superstar. He's already, in terms of charisma and Q factor and jersey sales, whatever you want to put into the equation, he can call if Ant is unhappy. If Ant says tonight, I don't know if I like this team right now, it will be all over everywhere. And it will be deafening. It will be, the season will be sidelined by the question. That's the way the NBA works. They want to know who can be the person that is the next bauble that we can play with until the next bauble comes along. People don't like basketball. They like headlines.
Or just the traits. I mean, it's a Luka thing.
Yeah.
I agree.
It was the opposite. I mean, that was a stupid play by Nico Harrison. But
Bobble.
back to my point, which is Chris Finch has decided, I have Ant's loyalty. I will let Ant figure this out on his own maturity timeline. He will make it enough that it is worth it, and he will certainly, if I have his loyalty. In November, when Ant called out the team and they asked, what can they do better? He said, listen to your coach. That's Anthony Edwards talking. When Ant said, Finch ripped the team, and Ant said, I don't know, I just thought we didn't shoot well. The next day in Phoenix, he comes back and says, I saw the tape. I couldn't argue with it. He was right. That's a superstar talking about his coach. That is gold for a coach. To have your superstar have your back in general all the time. I don't know if Finch could get that if he was tougher on it in the clutch, but I don't think it is a bad way to go for that relationship if I'm Chris Finch. So, and again, I have no evidence that that's true. For all I know, Finch is just blistering him a new ass every time he comes off the floor. And Ant just happens to be one of those great superstars that likes to be coached really, really hard. But you can't blame Ant for the clutch without also noticing that Finch lets it happen. Why is Finch letting it happen? To me, it's pretty obvious. In the NBA, the star stirs the drink. He doesn't stir the drink totally in Minnesota because he's happy with what he is able to stir. A lot of that happens in the last 2 minutes.
Yeah, I co-sign everything. It still is. You would agree that the primary reason why this team is worse in the clutch than it is that its normal mean is due to lack of execution and immaturity.
Well, the biggest person to blame is Ant. The second biggest person to blame is Chris Finch. The third biggest person to blame is Mike Conley. Because Mike Conley was a stabilizing influence last year and a half year before. He got through to Ant. He could take the ball. He could run things. Mike Conley doesn't have the same authority this year. He has slipped some. And that makes a difference in crunch time. So, again, clutch is a weird time. It's winning time, and there's all this mythology built up. Michael Jordan, unfortunately, was a superhuman individual who did clutch time better than anybody. Kobe did a kind of a bad imitation, in my view. But
you watched the Lakers game last night?
Yeah.
The LeBron missing too. I mean, it's not. For me, when I'm not like trying to get at him for missing those shots. Again, like that, LeBron is one of whatever in those times. It's the what is your process to getting there for all of those 5 minutes when the game is close, and do you have the awareness that like the defense is doing something different at this time? And I think Ant is growing in that. It's just like it's not a 10 out of 10 yet. Like I don't know how we show me maybe Luka at 23 was like a 10 out of 10 at like the computation of that stuff. But that's the cool thing about Ant is like if he gets even Luka-like understanding of those things, then he's 5 times the athlete that Luka is. And it can be something more and even more special. To my opinion, it's not one thing or the other, but to me, the primary thing is Ant and his growth and his understanding of that time. We can do another question here. You have a question? It's got a quick one. Good.
Do you think any of the Wolves players could beat Nafisa Collier in a one-on-one.
What are we playing? Are we playing? Are we playing like she has the ball at the top of the key and they have the person guarding them, and vice versa?
Just make it take it.
Okay. Then my answer is, as a huge Nafisa Collier fan, I would say that at least half the Wolves' current roster would probably beat her one-on-one simply because they are larger and faster. That does not take anything away from her, and I don't believe we get into these debates. I will tell you that there are some sports, and a lot of people think basketball is a sport that provides this balance. I myself do not. I like men's basketball more, although I am a big Lynx fan. I find women's volleyball to be far more enjoyable than men's volleyball because force is not as important as teamwork and finesse. And I think women generally have if I'm making generalizations, have a better sense of teamwork and a better desire for finesse. They're more aesthetic in their approach to games. And I also happen to think that Nafisa Collier, by the way, is one of the 2 or 3 best players in the WNBA. And last year, rightfully, was the Defensive Player of the Year and was the 2nd most valuable player in the league.
I don't know. I think she could be a couple of them for sure.
We just talked about Terrence Shannon Jr., where they need to be, where he needs to be in 2028. What's a realistic expectation for next year? Rob Dillingham and Jalen Clark.
I mean, I think Jalen Clark, like, this is like it's this forever. I mean, like that'd be good. You know, if he could play like he has the past.
Jalen Clark probably had one of his best stints in his NBA career. You know, if he hits 50% from 3 points over a 7-game period, again, it will be a bonus.
Let's see, like it falls 3 more times in the Lou Dort 2.0.
Well, and then again,
there's more to that,
but he's also got like 2 inches and 30 pounds that Lou Dort doesn't have.
Exactly.
But I think that reps in the NBA are important. I also think that Shannon was a plug-and-play collegiate. I don't think he is meant to be somebody who's going to be much better 3 years from now than he is now. I think Dillingham is the opposite. He's 19 years old. He's 165 pounds. That didn't matter as much in Kentucky as it does in the NBA. So he's got a lot to learn, and he's got a lot to bulk up on. I remember Tyus Jones's rookie year, his first couple of years. He just got handled. And so Terrence Shannon doesn't have the ceiling. Rob Dillingham and Jalen Clark certainly doesn't. Jalen Clark probably has the highest floor of those 3, just from what I've seen, because the guy can legitimately defend with a maniacal splendor that is a rare quality. But again, like the beauty of sports is the people on the fringe have a shot. Very few make it. Some make it in an amazing way. Some don't. And I would say that more than 50%, but less than 80%, has to do with that person himself. And the more of it has to do with the circumstances they put in and how they work around those or through those circumstances and where their
that's Nas.
Good fortune happens.
Yeah. What you're talking about is Nas checking the. I mean,
right. Well, that's true. Although I do think that you had Nas. I mean, he's being kind to me right now because I was ripping Nas the first 3 years of his existence, and he said, "There's something about this guy that I really like," and I mocked him. You know, and so I like.
But I was affirming the it's about. I thought what you were saying is like who the person is
inside can kind of determine what paths open up.
It can, but I also said less than 80%. You know,
Yeah.
I do think it's circumstantial. And from what we know now, I mean, Tim Connolly was higher on Nas than anybody in the organization when he came in. So kudos to Tim Connolly for that. I know Fitch was high on him to some extent, but certainly not when they got Rudy. And I thought that Nas was still a center.
Mhm.
Again, circumstances are a strange thing. I mean, if Wemby just went down for the season and his career has a little bit of a shadow on it, those types of things that happen with any team have ramifications. The ninth guy on the Spurs suddenly has a shot that they didn't have. It's a weird, life is weird. We have it in our own lives, Sometimes we luck out, sometimes we don't. And we really remember when we don't. And it's really important to remember when we do.
I think that's well put. I think with it will be a product of circumstance. But I think Terrence Shannon, when I look at him, I'd see the size and the skill set that opens up like a significantly higher ceiling than Jalen Clark. And honestly, in ways for me, like I don't really understand the Rob Dillingham ceiling yet. Like I know he can be good and stuff, but oftentimes when I think about Rob Dillingham, I'm like, all right, like if this really works, what does it look like? And you kind of like initially do the Trae Young thing because they're small, and I'm like, actually, I don't necessarily see that. Like I know Rob Dillingham,
but he's already a better defender than Trae.
Rob Dillingham is? Man, I don't know.
He tries, which puts him better than Trae Young.
Sure. I'm just my point is like the Terrence Shannon Jr. archetype. I can like envision and picture next year or 2 years from now being like, whoa, like it has the opportunity to pop in the way that Nas did, and I think Jalen Clark has a 0% chance of being
I
able to
agree
pop.
with that, but I think the things you're liking about Shannon, you should see in Dillingham. Dillingham beats people off the bounce. He surprises NBA players with his ability to get them out. I've seen people just basically that, especially if he's going right block off the bounce.
Yeah.
He can make that shot. When a 19, maybe just now 20-year-old kid can beat quality NBA defenders off the dribble.
I'm not saying Rob Dillingham's so bad. I'm just saying like it's a
a
harder.
You couldn't figure it out.
What I can't figure out is like that archetype of player it's a lot harder to make it in the NBA. The 6 foot flat offense more than defense guy. Like I was watching that Lakers Hornets game last night. I think like you guys probably don't know this is like Nick Smith is probably like the most similar player to Rob Dillingham right now. Just like a small guard who like can get buckets, is fast, can get off the dribble, but like what does that become? Like, where does that go 4 years from now? Because he's not going to be faster. He's going to be marginally stronger. It's not going to be. It's a really hard path to success. The 6'7", 225-pound kid who's already as a rookie showing us force, showing some playmaking, showing 3-point shooting. Like, I don't know. I only need to like in my mind paint in a few gaps in Terrence Shannon Jr. to be like, that is a really valuable, consistent player on a team.
Okay.
Rob Dillingham one just has more holes in it to me. I'm not saying the picture's not going to come together. It's just like
in 2030, Terrence Shannon will be 29, and Rob Dillingham will be 24.
Sure.
I think there's your answer. I think that.
I don't think I was giving like an answer. I was just.
But no,
like,
what you were saying is that look at what this guy could do. The guy is 24. The guy is older than Ant.
Yeah.
So, and I'm not backing off Shannon. I mean, he got by all accounts he got jobbed, and I am a firm believer in believe women and everything, but he got screwed in college by a false accusation and was cleared. And
Anyway, the basketball player, Rob Dylan, what is like?
no. My point is that Shannon is a very good player, but he's also a player that played 3 years in the Big Ten. And Rob Dillingham is 165 pounds and played 3/4 of the season in the SEC.
I'm not saying I'm buying Terrence Shannon Jr. stock over Rob Dillingham stock. I'm just trying to express that I think the path of a small guard in 2025 is difficult. I think we're already learning that now. And I don't think that like necessarily 4 years gives Rob Dillingham the things he needs to be able to have success. I just think it's a hard archetype of player to draft and bet on in today's day and age. I like what I see of Rob Dillingham within that archetype of player. I think the question was about next season, and I just think there's less resistance for Terrence Shannon Jr., partially because of his age, to become who he's going to be next year, or can find that than Rob Dillingham can, because it's just tough to do that.
Fair enough.
Okay. We got 2 more questions here. We'll wrap it up with 2 more questions. Or we're just going to yell at each other.
So
I actually enjoyed that.
I'm curious about the whole new ownership and new owner syndrome and everything like that. I'm curious about the dynamic between Lori and Rodriguez, and is it a really stable dynamic? Like, how do they even meet? Who runs basketball operations, or who's primarily making decisions about basketball decisions or business decisions, or are they doing it together? I'm just really curious because, I would hate to see any type of disruption in that relationship impact the floor.
Yeah, well, to the basketball decisions thing, Tim Conley will make those decisions.
Right.
And I think like the best feather in their cap that A-Rod and Lori have is like they were behind getting Tim Conley, in theory, right? And thus far to let him do his own thing, we'll see. I mean, that's a fair concern of any fan of a team who just got new owners. Is like, well, how are they gonna get in this and mess it up? I think it helps that like they do have a relationship with Tim. They've known him for 4 years. They've given him the autonomy to do whatever there. Like, I think the only thing we're gonna really like roll our eyes at is like they're gonna have like some weird techie, the new stadium. We're gonna probably be like, all right, that's weird that they put that in there. Because that's just how they are. Like, I think that's going to be the biggest quote unquote issue you feel with them. I don't know like the exact extent of their background. I mean, they connected upon trying to buy the New York Mets, so like 6 years ago now, 5 years ago now, and then kind of moved on over to the Wolves thing. I think that the hope is that they're able to let Tim Conley do his sprint. But yeah, he doesn't like this topic anyway. So yeah. I don't know. I mean, to be determined. We're gonna start to figure that out. I honestly don't know the answer to that, because all the like getting to know them has come through this weird veil of like who runs the team, Glenn Taylor, all this sort of stuff. Like we're about to start learning a lot about them and who they are and how they work. But the Tim part that's locked up and that he was theirs, that gives me a lot of. You said who's making the basketball decisions? Like, I think they're gonna let Tim do his thing. Do another question here. And then Dan, you're the last one. No, not this one. The next one. Unless your name's Dan too.
So,
all right, we'll talk later.
In 2025, NBA trades are pretty complicated. Don't know all the rules and stuff. We know Anthony Edwards and Kevin Durant have a relationship. I was wondering this summer, would it be possible to do if like Julius Randle opts into his option and we like do a sign and trade with Nikhil? Could that be included in a Kevin Durant deal? Is my question.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's definitely ways that they can get to. I think Katie makes like 54 next year, so whatever Randall like opts into, there's definitely ways where they can make the salaries match. I mean, I would assume like DiVincenzo is going to be in that deal too. I don't think it's going to be one of those where it's like, all right, let's choose all the players we don't like, trade them to the Suns, then get back Kevin Durant. Like, I think there's going to be some pain to it if they do that. I think there was when the whatever
connection they had there, and that's why they ultimately didn't make a deal. But if your question is it possible? For sure. They're definitely going to have the means to be able to match $50+ million to trade for Kevin Durant. The question is going to be, do they have enough assets to be able to get him? Do you want to put those assets in there? Rob Dillingham, they don't have picks really. Does Jaden need to be in that trade? What other young we'll see what Phoenix's demands are at that time, but I don't know. It's going to have. It can definitely be done. It would just, I think, come at a pretty significant cost of young players. You hear that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say, how many teams are going to take a chance on Kevin Durant and torpedo their team? I mean, it's happened how many times thus far?
And
Kevin Durant won 2 rings in Golden State. He was voted the MVP of the finals both years. All credit to him. I understand his skills. I think he is a phenomenal shooter. He's an underrated defender. He's a 6'11" spider. He's a freak of nature. He is also somebody who loses in the playoffs on by now a very regular basis as the person who's supposed to take you over the top. He's been swept 2 of the past 3 seasons in the first round. I don't want
definitely
to
don't trade 5
sacrifice the future of my team.
But what he was traded for to
What was the
Brooklyn.
question?
This is Dan Herman. He's the owner of Falling Knife Brewing coming out. Oh yeah, let's hear for Dan. Yeah.
No, I was just finishing out with thank you everybody for coming out tonight. We appreciate every amount of support we get for this. I know that last year we had a team with no expectations and we did very well. And this year we had a team with expectations and the team has done okay. And that would just be a statement of like, if you love a place right now, we're doing okay. We're grateful for all the support we have for this. If you love a place, a restaurant, a bar, a friend that does art, any of that kind of stuff, support them. It's pretty tough right now out there for people. And this isn't to say that you should spend your rent money on any of that. It's more to just to say, like, if you have the opportunity to do so, show up to the places that you want to stick around, because February's been cold and snowy, which is not good for places that require you to show up to them. So tip your servers, do all the good things, all the things I'm sure that everybody that comes to Falling Knife, comes to a podcast like this does. It's going to get scary out there for a little bit. You're going to hear about some places closing. I'm not saying anything insider, don't aggregate me, as Bill Simmons says all the time, but like, you're going to hear about some places closing that you're going to be like, what the fuck? Why is that closing right now? It's because it's a tough time out there right now. So not to bring it down, not to destroy the end of the thing, but if you love something, go support it. If you don't love it, don't go support it. It'll probably close down.
Dan, yeah, that's it for Dan. Dan and the Falling Knife team, and yes, thank you all here. I really do, I probably 3-4 years ago came here and met with Dan and the ownership team, and they were just like, hey, we want to be a place that does Wolf stuff. That was literally the start of our conversation, and I was like, okay, we can make that happen, and it has, it has. So many of you are here, for the playoffs last season, for the games. It's really, it is cold outside that, so many of you are here now and have come to, other events that we've done. But that's that's true for Falling Knife, and you're talking about other places around here. It's true for me and what I do as well, that you come, or that you listen, and that you support stuff, because it is what allows us, to do these sort of things. So thank you for listening. Just talking to a handful of you, that you listen and you care, and care to spend 90 minutes on a Thursday listening to me and Britt talk about way too long in every single topic like that. Yeah. No, it really does mean a lot, and we're doing good on the podcast. But whether it's Falling Knife or a lot of the other places that we talk about on the podcast, you skip ahead on the ads. Just think those places allow me to be able to do this and to do those things. So just echoing what Dan said, whether that's Falling Knife or just in general, I know Dan enough So he's not just talking about Falling Knife, he's talking about anywhere. Like, just go support those places. That's it makes a difference in our community.
You know in your heart who your friends are. And times aren't fun right now. So just support those friends. That's really what it's all about.
Love that. Love that. He's Britt Robson. This has been Falling Knife. I'm Dane and Dane Moore NBA. We'll be back to do a bunch more podcasts the rest of the season. Seriously, love you for coming out. Nas free. All right, until next time, peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.